Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to Celestial Compass. I'm Kathy Beal, and we're going to start with a brief update of the astrology for the month of November before we get to our main event. This is a very unusual month. It's been very stressful, actually, since basically 1987, to be quite honest. But this month has a massive gear shift in it midway. Midway through the month, we will notice a sensation of some situations starting to move themselves toward another way of being. And at the same time, Pluto is finally going to clear out of the sign of Capricorn, and we're heading into a 20-year period of a very different relationship to power, how we express it, how we share it, where power is located. And it's moving from top heavy to lateral. But before then, it's going to be bumpy, just bumpy. Just know that. And the full moon, the Taurus full moon at the middle of the month, as all of this is happening, is going to harken back to the middle of August 19th to be specific. And we will have pretty intense time and an opportunity to emotionally process what we've been through and to do a lot of releasing. And then we've got a Mercury retrograde coming up just in time for Thanksgiving. So know that we'll have the opportunity to go back over some things that will have come to light and been discovered during this time period. You'll find a lot more about all this in my forecasts, which are at Om Times, monthly and full and new moon forecasts, and at my site, empowermentunlimited.net, where I also have a weekly podcast. So I encourage you to follow up with all of that and know that whatever is going on at the beginning of the month, life will be very different by the end of it. All right, and now we're going to have some fun. My guest today is the Publishing Goblin, Seven Dane Asmund. He's an independent publisher, game designer, divination tool creator, and writer. He created and he published the most successful tarot deck Kickstarter ever. And he has a whole series of decks involving an interesting character named the Alleyman. He has produced 22 successful crowdfunding projects, and from poetry to divination to board games to card games, he has a constant stream of creative output. And I own a lot of it, which is sitting right here. So welcome so much, Seven.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so pleased you're here. Why Goblin? How did you come up with the name Publishing Goblin?
So yeah, as you noted, like I've been self-publishing for quite a while now. And I was beginning to work with another artist, and actually an academic occultist out of California known as the Caretaker, who once offhandedly referred to me as the Publishing Goblin, meaning the gremlin in the back office doing the management stuff. And that just really tickled me. So I decided to go ahead and own the moniker. I am definitely the Publishing Goblin in the back room making the things come to life.
That's delightful. Well, how did you come to tarot? How'd you come to divination and oracles?
I had my first tarot deck when I was 16 years old. Of course, I was being very, very whimsical with it. I just wanted to explore the concept of things beyond ourselves. And as time went on, another deck appeared, and then another. And then before we knew it, I began self-publishing originally with games. I was making board games, card games, role-playing games, those kinds of things. And then I was working with the Caretaker once more, who gave me this lovely moniker. And the Caretaker was designing a deck called the Normal Tarot, which is a very abnormal tarot, of course, because why would it be called the Normal Tarot if it wasn't really weird? The Normal Tarot is a 99 card deck that has just all the cards are different from a normal tarot deck. And we decided to try it out as a crowdfunding project, and it ended up taking off quite well. We were scared that we wouldn't make $4,000. We made $30,000. So next thing I knew, I was like, well, people love tarot decks. And it became a thing that I always return to. Every year, I feel like return to do some kind of tarot or oracle project because it's the strongest part of my business financially, but also it's the thing that really feels the most immediately useful to me.
So do you actually use it yourself? I mean, do you use tarot as a planning or divination tool? Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I do tarot. I really like to take it whenever I go places where I know there'll be just groupings of people that I might not know, right? I like to sit down at the table in the corner of a party or at a bar and lay out a cloth and put a tarot deck, and people just come to me and they come and they get to gain insight into the things they're currently thinking through and working through in their lives. And I think it's a really wonderful tool to be first meeting with people, where I sit down and I'm like, I don't know your story at all.
Mhm.
You get to ask me a question. I'm going to help you have a new perspective on your life. And then whenever I read with the Alleyman's tarot, I always give them a card from their reading so that they have something to remember the reading by. So I find it's a very important storytelling, space sharing, and kind of totemic activity. I really love tarot. I love divination tools. I think they do so much important work for social space in addition to personal space and making our own trajectories.
Since you brought up the Alleyman, where did he come from? What is he?
In 2020, we were in lovely pandemic times, and I was thinking about kind of the next thing I was doing. I had just made my Oracle dice before that, and my Oracle dice are a divination tool that I also have been redoing. I had a second edition just come out and working on a third for late next year. And so I was thinking kind of in a divination space, but I was also thinking in a storytelling space. I felt like I was really removed from the fiction writing that I had been doing previously. So I started imagining this character of the Alleyman, who was essentially just an alleyway scam artist. This person who is ubiquitous. They're at every major city. They're trying to get you to find which cup the ball is under, and definitely scamming you out of your money because they know better than you, and they're not playing a fair game. And I got this idea of this character who carried a tarot deck made of cards from a bunch of different decks, cards that he made up, Pokemon cards, maybe real tarot cards, just pieces of cardboard or receipts he'd written on. And my first inclination was to make a podcast and do a fictional radio drama podcast. And I had never done anything like that before, so I was very hesitant to do it. But I thought, you know what I can do? I could make the tarot deck, which I thought would be easier. Very funny for me. So the Alleyman's Tarot came to exist over a year or so of me just reaching out to people who had made tarot cards or tarot decks and saying, how would you like to license one card from your deck into a weird deck I'm putting together? And I put about a year into the hunting process for the first deck. I reached out to people on every website imaginable, art websites, non-art websites. I went through Kickstarters to see previously made tarot decks that had run there. And I gathered at the start, I think it was like 81 or 90 artists. And then by the end of the project, after it finished crowdfunding, there were 131 artists who had work either in the main deck or in the booster packs that came with the deck. You're like, haha, booster packs.
So people understand none of this is an ordinary 78 card tarot deck. There are multiples of different cards. I will tell you that the first time I did a spread with my deck, I had 3 death cards in it. That was sobering.
It is. There are 9 deaths in the main deck, and if you get the booster packs, there's 13 deaths overall, which is that's a lot. There's a lot of deaths, but I think that death is such an important card, especially for the world we live in, where we're talking about constant ending of small things moving into new things. I think we live in a world where we experience change at a much faster pace than any other time before. And so understanding the nuances of the changes in your life felt really important and impactful to me, for choosing 13 ultimate deaths. But yeah, it is kind of an odd deck. It's a little large, kind of a brick. Um, and yeah, you do have duplicate cards, but you have all the standard cards that you'd expect of a tarot deck. Yes, in the beautiful cigar box. And then you also have a fifth suit. So you have your typical, wands, swords, cups, and discs. And then you have a fifth suit that is made up of random things. So there's like a 5 of mirrors. There's a 7 of ducks. That's in the new one. Gosh, there was the 7 of clocks, I think, in the original Alleyman's deck. And then you have the second arcana, which is just a whole additional 25 or 30 new major arcana cards that range from so many different things. I mean, I have the guidebook here. It's made to look like a journal, so it's the Alleyman's musings on the cards that he put in the deck. And then the second arcana, you can have like the Undaunted, or you can have Hope. There we go. Hope. Or over here, weird ass mystical shit. For when you have strange things unfolding in your life. You have the boogeyman and fear, which are different methods of ways that fear interact with your life. And it was a very, very strange and unique deck. And as you noted, it became the most funded, most backed tarot crowdfunding project ever. And it still is to this day, which is a very fun thing to do, especially because of the nature of it, where there was not just me making a deck, it was 131 people plus me. And we all came together to put cards into one deck. And so in a way, it just kind of was like, we all won. We all got to be the most funded project because we all got to include pieces of our art and the things we were making. I think it's
Did
neat.
you know any of these artists beforehand, or you just did a lot of research and reached out to them?
The vast majority, no. There were a handful, like 6 or 7 maybe, artists that I knew beforehand who I reached out to have them make cards for the Alleyman's deck. But pretty much every single artist I reached out to who had a full, complete deck, who licensed one card into here, I had never met beforehand. And so I will say that the beginning of the year of collecting the artists was actually really hard. No matter how much I explained the concept, then they'd be like, well, who else is involved? What other cards do you have? And I'm like, well, very few, because no one knows who I am. But the more it picked up steam, the more people were interested in just including a card, to the point that a lot of them, I was letting them set the fee for how much they would license it for. A lot of them would license it for free because they just thought it was a neat idea. And at the time, we didn't expect it to make any money. So at the beginning, there was very little money being talked about going between hands. But of course, by the end, I put in a bonus structure to give everyone extra money for taking part, because it was a lot more money than I had expected it to make.
And there are many iterations of this. It's not just a single deck. I mean, I'm looking, I have so many boxes here, I'm not even sure what they all are.
Yeah, very much so. So that was 2021 was the Alleyman's Tarot. And then just last year, I did the Alleyway Oracles, which was
That's what I got.
new set of 3 decks. So there is a tarot deck, which is right here, the Alleyway Tarot. It comes in this faux book box. It has the guidebook inside, and then you take the book out, and you've got the deck kind of just sitting in here too, which I just think is fun to have everything in one little spot. And the Alleyway Tarot was a 100 card deck done in the same way. So all the cards are from other tarot decks or from museums or cards originally made just for it. And they don't match at all, which is the fun part. And then I did 2 Oracle decks, the Oracle of Play and the Oracle of Secrets. Each of these started as a 60 card deck, and they kind of expanded from there a little bit. They're 66. It's still reasonable. The Oracle of Secrets is the more dark, secretive deck for shadow work and some of the harder questions. And the Oracle of Play is actually a lot more complicated than it originally began to be. It was going to be a playful, whimsical, fun deck, and that's still in there, but it also has some real big questions in it, where it's directing you in a kind way, I would say, towards some actually difficult topics. And especially part of the reason that happened is every guidebook that I wrote from the perspective of a different Alleyman. The concept being that the Alleyman is more of a spirit, and it wanders between people who need it. So for the Oracle of Secrets, it's very purple prose, it's very poetic. But the Oracle of Play, the Alleyman for that one is a child psychologist. And so he kind of comes across in a wry way, and he gives you roundabout stories that connect you back to what the card means. So it ended up being the strange, most contemplative of the decks, which was not intended, but it ended up being that way. I think that's fun too.
And to make it clear to people who are watching, all of these cards are they're in wildly different styles. There's not an aesthetic continuity at all in the slightest.
Yeah, and like you'll see a bit more of an aesthetic leaning in the Oracle deck. So like this is the Oracle of Secrets, and it is kind of a bit moodier and a lot of black cards. But then you have this one, which is this lovely little drawn one. This one from Matthew Puzzle's deck, the Arcanalis, which is a fun photo collage. We have like a hand-painted one from a canvas. This one is from a really fantastic epic poem, which it's called Astromythos. I don't remember the artist right now, but really lovely book. Oh, John Sidertis. It's on the back of the card. And depending on what cards you pull, like they can be just so completely different. And that's really delightful. Of course, they all have different backs because they have the backs from the original decks. And while they are very, very bizarrely different, especially in the tarot, where you'll get one that looks cartoony and then one that's a beautiful painting, there was always this like very specific editorial eye when I was putting the decks together, where I was like, that doesn't fit. Oh, that does need to go in. And sometimes it was a matter of, I need something that is a powerful pink punch in the face. And it fits nowhere in the deck, but I need it because it's an important thing I have to fill out here. So there was this weird sense that I always had for all of the decks where I know exactly what can go in and what can't, even though they look so different, which is weird.
Yeah, well, and there's a cohesiveness. And interestingly, the way I found this was people who follow me on social media are aware that there is a witches' night market that I go to frequently called Lunar Fair. And there is someone there who in her booth one time had what she had the first Alleyman deck, and she had the guidebook, and she was letting people pull one card. And I did this a few times and went, oh, I got to follow this. So when the next Kickstarter came, money was leaving my account from that. And she now does chaos readings.
Yes.
What she calls with using your various decks. And that's a good way to put it.
I have fans or supporters or dear acquaintances at this point who lovingly call it the slab. And it's every deck I put out, they get, and then it goes into like this huge box, and it's the slab. They can't shuffle it anymore. It kind of gets moved around. They draw random cards out of it because they can't pull it all out at once. And I think that's a good way to call it. It's the chaos decks, the mixy decks, the slabs. And I think it's so delightful. I keep mine in a leather bag, and I do not really bother pulling it out to shuffle. At times I reach in and just grab random cards.
Yeah, the ones I have, it's impossible to shuffle. There's just way too many of them. Well, and it's not just cards. You have an entire ecosystem around it, basically, at this point. Because there's lots of ephemera. I don't even know what everything is. I have a special wand in here. No, it's a candle. One of mine came with a candle. I don't know what that's for.
I have all kinds of little goodies to the mythos of it all. In the original Alleymans, it came with a poker chip and also a coin. And the deal with that was you could do like a 3-card reading for someone, and then you set the token on top of the deck. And the idea is if they want to know more, they have to take on the weight of picking this up from the deck and essentially having the bet in their hand. Because there are some times that I found that people don't need, or maybe it's not the right time for them to get deeper answers. They need something to push them in a direction. But if they're really going to sit down and buy in to the rest of the reading, it felt useful to have this token that gave it weight in their hands. And then you were talking about the candle. There were bags that came with the new decks. There was additional tokens, because I love little tokens. There was additional oracle dice, because I made oracle dice, and so I have to, of course, do more dice over time. And just a quick disclaimer, oracle dice are a set of dice that are all different colors, and they all have different symbols on their faces, and you cast them out on a reading grid that it comes with. So it's just like an alternative form of casting charms or runes or bones or something. And it reads very similar to tarot, I'd say. So yeah, I've done a lot of extra little trinkety things because I find that delightful. And with the Oracle of Secrets, the one that came with the candle, there's also a key that has teeth that come out in 4 different directions, so that if you are hanging it from a chain, you could use that as a pendulum, which I thought would also be quite delightful. Having a key lead your way in pendulum divination just seemed really, really fun. So I feel like I'm always exploring in different material ways, like ways you can make divination more tactile, which is why, of course, in addition to the oracle dice, I had to do a set of stone oracle dice, which are wildly different and heavy. And I had to make the box. I mean, who doesn't want a fun wooden box?
So did you read a lot of fantasy growing up?
What would make you think that? You know, it's funny because a lot of the things that I read growing up were like vampire. Like I read Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles growing up. I loved that. I really liked fantasy, but I always leaned horror. I was reading the young adult horror books growing up. Someone having a raptor baby. I'm thinking of Paul Zindel as the author. He had a book about this ghastly abomination that came out of Stonehenge, and I was like in love with that. I loved horror. I read so much horror, actually. So I don't know. It's fantasy-ish, but I've always liked the idea, and I think this comes through with the Alleyman a lot, of there being things in the world around us that if we turn just down the correct alley, you'll find something that's fantastical, or maybe horrific. But everything I've made so far has been a little more fantastical than horrific, hopefully.
And it makes me think of, this is going to sound like such an odd equivalency here, but used to be the rubber stamps were a really, really big thing. And there was a division between the cute teddy bear rubber stampers and the people who were just weird. Guess which I was. So
we love the weird.
And so there's an edge. These are not sweet, comforting decks, any of them. But
I call them
that's
kind.
what you need.
I call them kind. Sometimes they have hard messages, but hopefully they don't backhand you. Oh yeah, they can definitely be a little intense. I have found that a lot of the readings that I just did over the last couple of weeks, actually, for people were very sobering for them. There was some crying, and it's like, but was it a message you feel was helpful? And they're like, yes. It was hard to hear, but yes, it was so helpful. And I was like, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes those are the ones we need the most.
Those of us who've been reading know this. This actually reminds me, circling way back, what was your very first deck? Was it Rider-Waite? I'm guessing it wasn't.
What makes you wonder that one? Yeah, very much it was not. My very first deck was the Deviant Moon. And I love the Deviant Moon Tarot, but I can't use mine anymore. I feel like it got stuck in a particular cycle, and it stopped giving me new messages. So I had a Visconti Forza after that, which I was a huge fan of. But it also is doing a very similar thing. So they have been put away in a box together where they can be haunted with the same messages over there in the corner. And I very much moved on. The one that I use the most often, that is my go-to, is the Toth.
Yeah, that surprises me not in the slightest.
No, I got a large version that was the large art, and then I hand cut off all the borders and rounded them. So there's no text. It's just lovely card. 'Cause I think the art is so delightful. And this is the one I did the most reading in bars with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you more about your background after the break.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone, hang on, hang in. We've got more to come. Taking a short break now. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking with Seven Dane Asmund, who is the Publishing Goblin, or maybe Publishing Goblin. I don't know. And we've been talking about a lot of your various compilation decks and magical things that you've been creating. And I want to just go way back. Do you have a background in art?
I may just. My whole self-publishing journey was just a matter of not being interested in going through traditional publishing routes. I've been self-publishing since 2010, and I was releasing poetry and short story compilations in little books. And I did a bunch of those actually throughout my undergrad, and then I did my graduate degree, a master's in poetry in Chicago at Columbia College Chicago. So I very much come from a background of, who gets a master's in poetry, right? Like, I put a lot of interest and weight and value into art in all of its forms, which is a lot to do with why I've really enjoyed spending so much time in the divination space, especially with all the incredible artists who have made their own tarot decks that I had the incredible opportunity to meet, talk to, and work with through the Alleyman's decks. Because obviously, these decks can't exist without the amazing work that has already been done by these other artists and divination individuals who already put all their time and energy into making a really beautiful deck on their own. So I have extreme respect for all of the arts.
You also, what's your background with games? Because that seems to be a running gag, a through line, that there seems to be something else going on. But you've created games as well, right?
Very much so. So I've made some role-playing games. I've made, oh goodness gracious, I made a board game called New Avernus, which is about building a city during a constant apocalypse. I have made role-playing games that run on cards because, of course, everything has to run on cards now that I am the card creature. I have Zoetrope, which is a time travel role-playing game that runs on cards. And I also have What We Possess, which is a ghostly storytelling game that runs on cards. Nice little box. So when I say role-playing games, storytelling games, I'm talking like Dungeons and Dragons, those kinds of games where you are building a story with friends, and then a lot of what your focus is on is building a shared communal story space where we all get to have characters that have some influence on the story, but we also get to experience something new that one of our friends might build out and plan for us with all kinds of fun secrets and reveals. I think that's all very delightful. I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 16. And I've just really enjoyed role-playing games ever since. There's some very delightful ones out there, like World of Darkness, which explores an urban fantasy kind of space instead of being all castles and medieval. And I just think it's all really, really fun. I think that there's no reason we should ever stop being storytellers in our lives. And a lot of these kinds of games just allow you to continue that tradition. And I think that's just a really important thing we shouldn't forget.
It fits in. I certainly resonate with that very, very much so. Anybody who follows my astrology knows that I'm looking for the story,
Yes.
following the through line, looking for the dots. Well, you've got other stuff that you're working on. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. So right now, which is live on BackerKit, is a really, really big role-playing game called Confluence: The Living Archive. This is one of the 6 books that kind of comes with it, and it is a diegetic atlas, which just means it is an atlas that comes from the world that it's about. So we are pretending that the Ikari Archive is a real organization, and they went through their world and created an atlas about the spaces in their world. And so that's what this is that I'm showing you right here, and it's full of fun little marginalia. So you get little things that are drawn in the corners from people who have carried the book before, or photographs or artist renderings maybe of people from the world. The idea is that this atlas has been carried by people who actually live in the world. It's a very complicated deal to talk about, and maybe not exactly the point of what we're doing here today, but it is a really important game to me because all of the things I've made kind of exist in this shared universe. So everything that I've done, all of my games, including my divination things, are all tied to stories, which I keep talking about. And Confluence, the Living Archive, is the game that kind of exists at the center, where everything can kind of meld together. So the Alleyman, as a spirit of performance, has visited the world in Confluence, the Living Archive, many times. We will be doing a tarot deck set in that space using all of the fake cultural touchstones that exist in that world at the new major arcanas and suits and things. So I always have fun with that. I think that that's super fun. I am also working on the Hot Housewives tarot deck, which is a really bizarre deck. It is a lambasting of 50s Americana and American exceptionalism. I'm currently building that out. You can join us over on Kickstarter anytime. It's called the Hot Housewives Tarot. Every week on Fridays, I'm putting out an update to tell people what the progress is working on the deck. And as of the 1st, I just put out an update that finalized what cards are going in the deck. So what I'm doing from here on is I'm going to begin doing the visual design for the deck and making the cards. So that's super fun.
Will that be a consistent aesthetic, one artist, or is that going to
Yeah, so that one I'm doing completely on my own. I am basically writing up the guidebook entries. That's what I just finished doing, and then or the rough drafts anyways. And then I will be putting together the cards myself, digital collage and illustration work, from here until it's done. Unfortunately for me, while it is on the verge of a traditional tarot deck, it's a little different, as all my decks are. We did end up adding like 20 extra cards, so it will be a large deck. There's no stopping me. I just can't help myself. And then December 3rd, I have another deck going live on BackerKit called the Misery Tarot, which is heavily inspired by my love of horror as a genre, especially from particular games like Silent Hill, which are just some of the most beautiful, somber explorations of people's grief and trauma through the horror genre. And I think that's really lovely. So that deck will be one artist as well, Enoch Duncan, who has already done a few cards. You can see them over on that page, which I can drop links to later. But yeah, I'm working towards having more decks that are a little unified, because I would really love to make a game that uses a tarot deck to function instead of dice. And it's funny because there's not a single deck I've made that is a normal tarot deck. So it's really hard to say, okay, draw, did you get the 5 of Wands? It's like, well, no, I got the 5 of Corkscrews. And it's like, okay, well, one of these days I'll make a normal deck, and it won't be called the normal tarot because I already did that and it wasn't normal.
I personally am not holding my breath for this eventuality. So how do you get your ideas? You're out walking, you go, oh, this is now something I want to go do. I mean,
it's very much an endless thing. I've described it before as a manic need to create. There have been so many nights where I start thinking about a new idea or a new project, and I'm not allowed to go to sleep until I think from the start to the finish. And then, of course, I have to grab my phone and start jotting it down in a note. And I think it's just a matter of I spend so much time consuming so much random stuff. The last couple years, I went from having almost never watched a TV show in my life to watching way too many seasons of way too many shows. And they started ranging the gamut. And I get into these fixations where I just start consuming all of the media about a thing. So one of the recent things I did was superheroes. And I watched all of the modern, I would say the last 30 years, TV shows, movies, cartoons, live action, superheroes, whatever it was from. And from that, I walk away with random snippets where I'm like, oh, this thing they did that one time would be such a unique exploration of a really difficult topic. And then I just run away with that. I wish that I read as much as I used to, but my nightly thing now has been just getting through another 20 million seasons of some show I don't like, because there ends up being a thread in it that I think is super fun and I bet I could do something with.
That is fascinating. I'm very curious what you've been watching.
That's the problem, is that there's so many. I'm watching The Penguin. I'm watching an anime called Dandadan. I'm watching I just finished Agatha All Along, which is another Marvel thing, but it was witches, so it was fun. I just constantly have so many things that end up happening, and then I'm on a thing. I'm like, oh, they added a new movie that's in this genre. I will watch that now. I just finished watching a Discovery of Witches, and there's so many pieces and everything that I
Read
end
the
up
books.
finding.
They're much better than
Oh,
the
I would
series.
bet. The show was frustrating. It was so frustrating. Oh, I won't spoil any of it, but there's sometimes when writers write a thing and then they pretend it doesn't exist next time they get to a problem. And I just want to shake my fist. You can't have time travel and then be like, well, we'll just pretend it's not real. Rude.
You have very strong opinions about these things.
Oh, I have so many opinions. I think that's a lot of what my takeaways end up being, is I have strong opinions about the things I watch and read, and then those inform the thing I wish they had done better, and then the thing I wish they'd done better becomes the thing I become obsessed with making myself. It's a good feedback loop.
Have you ever heard of the concept of a self-amusing personality? I had a friend who wrote a long essay about it in the 90s zine world, and I think you are in the dictionary for it also, which is, I take that as a compliment. I don't mean it
Very
as
much
insult
so.
at all. Are there any of your children you are especially fond of, or does it vary by mood?
Oh my gosh. I will just say again, I love my Oracle dice. They're my favorite thing that I've made. I can say that flat out. I'm planning the third and final edition, which would be the definitive. This is what it is. It's the tool. Carry it into the world. But the Oracle dice is my favorite. I can't help it. You get like a double-sided reading grid. You get a lovely guidebook that walks you through them. The dice are so tactile. I think it's my favorite thing, is when I can make a physical thing. You get to touch and move and hear. That's when I feel like I've made something that feels real. I will say that I did the Alleyman podcast, and then because I wanted a physical version to go on my bookshelf, because I want everything I have ever made to be lined up in chronological order on my bookshelf, because I have to, I was like, I guess I'll make a CD set. And then people came together and put $27,000 on a campaign to realize a CD set for a podcast you can get for free anywhere. I'll never understand that, and I'll appreciate it till the day I die. But I got to make a physical version of this really bizarre experiment. I've written fiction, I've written stories, I've never written scripts that people actually performed, let alone directed and then mixed them and made the audio masters. Like, I had never done anything like that before, and it was a fictional radio drama that took place in fake podcasts. And then I got to do it, and people loved it so much that I got to make a real physical version. So even though this is like such a weird random thing to be like, I made a radio drama about the myth of the Alleyman, who is a cryptid I made up. That's such a fun thing to be able to have done. And it doesn't make me any money. The podcast set certainly didn't make me money. It took all the money just to manufacture CD sets, which are expensive, by the way. But it got to exist. And I think that's my favorite thing about everything I make, is that even if it's something that just makes money and I don't feel as in tune with it, the money gets to fund the little thing that means the world to me that will never make me money. And that feels delightful. Like, I just did some poetry books. And I know the fact of poetry. There are 3 readers in the middle of the world who read poetry, and that's who we write for. But I still get to make a book just because people support the things that I make. So favorite child is the Oracle dice, but secret
Well,
favorite child, the
would you be
podcast.
able to demonstrate them for us?
Absolutely, I'd love to. So obviously, I don't have the space in the middle of the air to lay out the reading grid, but for example, in these lovely wooden boxes, I have this wood lid space that I sometimes use to do small readings. So I would take the dice that I feel would align with the question typically. For a small reading, I usually just take the seasonal dice. So the seasonal dice are, the ones you'd expect. We have the green die with yellow ink, which is the spring die. We have summer, yellow with this burnt red. We have autumn, which is this lovely orange with black. And we have winter, which is blue with white ink. And so you might ask a question. If you would like to, you could actually ask it right now. Put you on the spot.
So would this be a timing question, or just? But
it could be any question.
Dice.
Yeah, any question. Imagine it's like a 3-card tarot poll.
Okay. Information about my next book. How's that?
Information about next book. And the seasonal dice are great because they're kind of the basis for any reading. I always start with them. So I would start with them. And since you're asking about, I would say, project, I will add the monarch die, which deals with the life cycle of a butterfly. So I will cast them out into the dish here. I have them. Immediately, I have a pairing. Spring and summer are together. We have radiance and sex. It's telling me right now that there is going to be probably deeply related to the book. Physical connection, intimacy with other people is going to be kind of a radiating force that might be a little overwhelming in the moment. It might be something that could be very distracting. Out on its own, right over here, we have the winter die. It's revealed the sorrow. We have the eclosion here for the monarch die, which is the moment that a butterfly leaves the cocoon. And over here, we have the chariot on the autumn die. So altogether reading, I would say, obviously the chariot's telling me that there is like fruition that you come to. You do reach end of journey, which is a successful moment. Eclosion tells me that you were in a space of a cocoon, and in realizing the book, you're going to be realizing yourself emerging from it, which both means the project comes to an end, but also it means that you get to bask in the joy of escaping the thing, which sounds horrendous, but it's kind of honest. When you're in the cocoon, it can feel like you're very, very stuck. And being able to leave it is a very freeing moment. The sex, the radiance, the sorrow, I find that these are really bizarre moments in the reading. Obviously, I had already said that the sex and radiance it feels like there's going to be something to do with physical connection. And maybe that you feel a little disconnected from other people during the course of it, and physical touch with other people. Sex can, of course, be explicitly sex, but I usually read about physical connection with people, literally touching, holding, hugging, being in the presence of and experiencing a person fully. I feel like this might be like your outcome of it. Once you have emerged from the cocoon, you get to return to the basking glow of actual connection with people. The winter sorrow does let me know that there's something really important during the process of writing or creating the book that you are letting go of, something that's probably really difficult and painful to have worked through. And so even when you come to success, it might be a little bittersweet, especially at the beginning, until maybe more time has passed. I don't think it's something that's just resolved by actions. I don't think you can fix it. It just seems like there might be a bittersweet realization of getting successfully through it. There's still celebration, But it's one of those things where you have to party for you and everyone's so happy, but you're kind of thinking about all the things that you had to give up or work through or struggle with to get there. And so that is a very, very quick run of what this would be like. If I had the reading grid, I would also relate it to your mind, your heart, what you do physically to the world, how the world physically affects you. But quick and dirty readings are also always an option.
Thank you very much. We'll have to see. I have a long list. I don't know which one it's going to be. But I can also tell that running into you in a bar would be a really fun thing.
It's one of my favorite things. I love being the weirdo at the bar with a tarot deck. What a story.
See, stories, yeah.
It's always stories.
I take a different deck to parties. I have a grouping of go-to decks, and it's a way to interact with people. Actually, you just sit there and everyone wants to, you'll read my cards. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I can ask anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go for it. What deck do you take? I'm curious. What decks?
Well, it varies. I have a deck that is every single card is a Meryl Streep roll. That one is a crowd pleaser.
Yes.
I've recently acquired a photo montage food deck that is stunning. Cacio e Pepe, that people just relate to. And it's really unusual. And you have to kind of, it does follow the structure of the deck, of a tarot deck, but it doesn't have numbered pips or any numbered cards, actually. For example, the 5 of Cups, disappointment, is milk and cookies, because sometimes you have to feel the feels. So I find that one a really accessible one. I also have one, the Millennial Tarot.
Oh, no.
Split avocado on the back of it. It's another really good party deck. And I've recently been given a deck that's based on the drawings of Al Hirschfeld. I don't know if you were familiar with him. He used to, for like 80 years, he chronicled performers, Broadway, movies, MGM, TV. And I can tell that one is going to speak to people really well as well. And then, otherwise I take the Robin Wood deck. I don't use Rider-Waite. I use a more Celtic, slightly softer version of it.
Yeah.
Out of like 1,000 decks. Those are just the ones that I take with me. But yeah, big surprise.
I get it. I have a lot of decks.
Yeah, they're spreading across my living room floor like kudzu, but I've got bins of them on another floor, like in the basement, and they're okay. But they all have personalities, and just like yours have a very, very definite personality.
Oh yeah.
So with where you are at this point, there are a couple that are still in development, like Confluence, or that's a game.
Yeah, Confluence is a game. The Hot Housewives Tarot is in progress. It is probably looking for somewhere around May when it'll be complete, and then I'll be looking to release. And then the Misery Tarot, which has been started mostly in guidebook entries so far, for December 3rd is when it launches. Otherwise, the normal tarot, I just did a 3rd edition of it, and that with reprints of the first 2 editions are actually shipping out to people right now. They will have it in mid-November here. The Alleyman Oracle's just finished. It is in everyone's hands. And there's just always things moving places. Oracle dice are available. They're out there. The Alleyman's Tarot is still available. It was a one-time printing, but there's so many. There's so many in the world. So those are always available at alleymantarot.com. Just a shameless plug.
Yeah, these are not cards for the easily freaked. Okay, so if you've got people in your social circle that you think will flip out if they see the 10 of Swords or the Tower or the Death card in a normal deck, these are not the people to shove these decks to, because they won't know what to do with themselves.
My favorite has been people who tell me that the Alleyman's Tarot was their first tarot deck. And I'm like, wow, that had to have been such a shocking way to learn. And they're like, no, it was super easy. I'm like, If you say so, I'll take it. But 137 cards maybe isn't quite your typical deck.
Well, I really, really appreciate you bringing all of your toys and telling us about your various projects. Where can people find you?
Absolutely. Pretty much if you just go to www.publishinggoblin.com, you will find links to everything from social media to the Square store to the Alleyman store, where you can get the Alleyman tarot decks and the Oracle dice. But yeah, everything pretty much just comes straight out of publishinggoblin.com.
And that's where people can find out about what you've got in backer kit right now.
Yeah, if you go to the main page and you scroll down, it'll show you all of the currently happening projects and upcoming and the ones that just finished. And if you go to the about and the timeline, you can see a chronological order of all 43 projects that I have done. There's a lot.
Okay, I think November is going to be my month of the prolific guests, because the other people I have coming on have been doing this for 50 years.
Oh,
They've got a
gosh.
huge backlog, but
Quite a catalog,
you
I'd
certainly
imagine.
have brought it in much quicker. Well, this has been a blast. I enjoy mine. Like I said, getting 3 death cards in one reading made me go, oh yes, do not take this deck lightly.
No, but
You're
it's
going to
good.
get important stuff here.
Absolutely.
So thank you. I wish you really, really good continuing success. I suspect that you'll get a little uptick in traffic from people seeing this. And everyone else out there, remember that my forecasts are at empowermentunlimited.net and at Ohm Times. And if you go to the Professional Aquarian YouTube channel, everything is there. And I also have a string of political forecasting videos for those of you who are at all inclined in that way. So head there for that kind of stuff. If you go to my site, you can also get on my newsletter and get every week you get direct links to all of the latest stuff. So thanks, everyone. Be safe. Thank you again, Seven. It's been a blast meeting you.
Thanks for having me on, Kathy. It was delightful.
Stay in touch. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.